Hi, I'm Sarah,
And I'm Tess.
and this is the Basically Bookish podcast.
You clicked on this episode, you know why we're here. Today we're discussing Yesteryear by Caro Claire Burke.
Yesteryear has got to be one of the buzziest, most talked about books of 2026, and after reading it, it's clear to see why.
This episode will be more of a free format discussion as we really just want to pick each other's brains about this book and what it's trying to tell us about social media, rigid gender roles, womanhood in the modern era, and the performance of it all.
We just got done reading it. We'd love to know your thoughts as well. Have you read this one yet? What did you think of it?
Okay, so let's start with a little bit of background information. Yesteryear is the 2026 debut novel by Caro Claire Burke. The story follows Natalie Heller Mills, a tradwife social media influencer who wakes up one day in the 19th century where she must learn how to live without modern society. The novel is both satire and suspense, and that is via Wikipedia.
The rights to this novel were bought by Amazon and MGM Studios back in 2024, before the book was even published. Anne Hathaway is slotted to produce and star in the film, and I guess there was a lot of back and forth to get the rights for this book.
So, if you couldn't tell already, this episode will contain really heavy spoilers. So, if you haven't finished the book yet and don't want spoilers, go and finish it first. We will be here when you're done. Okay, you've been warned.
And really quickly, before we get started, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave us a comment or a review from wherever you're tuning in. We'd love to hear from you. You can find us at Basically Bookish Pod across all platforms.
All right, so let's start with our star ratings and why.
So, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So I'm giving this one a four stars. I really enjoyed it. I thought that it was a very pointed look at modern day society, social media, womanhood, and patriarchy in a lot of ways. It wasn't an enjoyable read. Like, I wasn't having a good time, but it was a good book. And so I'm giving it 4 stars. The reason why it lost a star for me was because I felt that at times it was a little bit heavy-handed and I could see a little bit too much of the author's hand while I was reading it. And I also think that there were a couple pacing issues that kind of took me out of the story a little bit. But overall, I think it was a great book, an important book. And even though there's not one character that you can like, I really empathized with a lot of them.
Right. Yeah, that's a great summary of it. I gave it a 4.3. I knew nothing really going into this book. I knew that she was going to go back in time, but that was about it, which I feel like I had really low expectations for what it was about, which sounds like it made the ending better for me. I read some discourse online that people had some expectations. And so the ending was really disappointing for them. It is the most depressing, scariest book that I've read in a while. It should probably be required reading for anybody who posts regularly on the internet. It's a page turner, and it was so refreshing to be in that space where I could not put it down. Just like you, I thought it was a sharp and equally biting commentary on contemporary internet culture and womanhood in general. But like with 24 minutes remaining, I was like, this book, it's out of here. I'm so mad at it. It was really hard to swallow.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So I'm just gonna like pull up my notes.
Yeah, I kind of like put it into little sections, like you said, character, setting, and themes. So I just put it in
Yeah,
those little sections.
like my notes are as normal, like insane. So, like you were saying, I didn't know a ton about this book going into it, but I did know that it had some sort of twist ending. So I read this book kind of like a who done it, where it was like it's gonna be
Oh,
Caleb in the barn with a
mm.
pickaxe. Or at one point, I was like very certain she was going to be lobotomized. There was another point where I was like, okay, she's going to die in childbirth. I was really like looking at everyone. There was a couple lines in the beginning where Natalie is talking about how if she had more time to become a better person and to deal with her anger issues, then she would have. And there's just like a couple phrases early on in the book that made me very cognizant of like, or at least in my perception, I thought that like Natalie was not going to exist by the end of the book in one way or another.
Yeah,
So
I agree with that on some level. I knew right off the bat that she was hiding something. We had talked about there was something about right in the beginning when she's like, and his daddy was a senator. And there's just something so obfuscating about that. It's like a sentence that could be used anytime in the last couple hundred years. And so I could tell that there was something unreliable around about Natalie.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean you hate Natalie right off the bat, and so you easily want to dismiss her, but there's just so much to the story that you're like repeatedly lured in into her like realm of craziness, and you're just like, okay, here we go. And you kind of keep going back in to see like what is she doing in here? I was even expecting more from the character to go into their doctrine and their beliefs, why they were, it was sort of surface level in that.
Right. I think that at the end of the day, the religious portion of it kind of became a vehicle to talk about these other issues because her religion was never specified, which I think is some of the backlash that's come about this book is like some people that were brought up in high control religions saying, well, this part isn't really fully explored or divulged or empathized with. And again, that's kind of where I felt Burke's hand a little too hard. I think that there's something a little bit like meta and interesting about her writing this book as like kind of the ultimate angry woman.
Mm.
Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Yeah, I think aside from just being, the Christian background was all that they really specified in it. And it did keep it vague on purpose. I think there were a couple parts of the book that were left vague on purpose, like the assault,
Right.
just so that everyone had to like gather their own information from it. I think it's meant to be destabilizing because the entire book was like that. It's actually Clementine's character that's the real throughput of the book, which you barely even notice that character in the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. Clementine and Rena, right?
Right. Yeah. And Rena.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Speaking of characters, I would like to talk a little bit about Caleb. Yes. So for me, I think that Caleb is a really great example of how patriarchy hurts men as well. So of
Right.
course, we have Caleb, who is a Nepo baby. He kind of has been fed with a silver spoon, so he doesn't have the same sort of drive and ambition to go out and make his way on his own as maybe Natalie or other people that weren't born in those circumstances feel. But removing that, I feel that Caleb as a character starts out as this very soft and malleable person who is open to the world and open to experiences. He is very loving with their first child, Clementine. Natalie kind of talks about how that's the only thing that he's really good for. And at one point, Caleb even talks about how he wants to become a kindergarten teacher. But in Natalie's opinion, I think the quote is something that is the career equivalent of a flaccid penis. And so for Natalie's expectations of her husband, and filling this traditional masculine role, him wanting to be a kindergarten teacher and working with children and like nurturing the more nurturing side inside of himself isn't enough. And there's also a line in the book that talks about that Natalie is thinking to herself that it's so easy. Like, I'm very ambitious. I'm wanting to go out and kind of claim the world for my own. And it would be so easy if just I was born as a man and Caleb was born as a woman. But instead of allowing themselves to be who they are, Natalie decides that a kindergarten teacher isn't masculine enough for her. It doesn't have as much prestige as his family demands. And so
The
that's not
optics
an
aren't
option.
right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that it kind of, for me again, like it reinforces the way that stereotypical patriarchy forces men into a specific box. That's also harmful for them because by the end of the novel, Caleb is completely sucked down into the manosphere. He's abusive towards his wife. He doesn't interact with his female children. And he also like kind of like co-conspires with the male children to keep his wife like somewhat captive. And
Right.
his original character is like completely gone. So again, I think that was so brilliantly done. I don't know if it was purposeful, but I do think that we watch how patriarchy harms men through Caleb.
Right, absolutely. And also I think that Caleb has so much responsibility for what happens to the whole family in the way that he allows Natalie to fall into this really horrible mental illness. and postpartum psychosis
Right.
without finding her proper help. And he's really, in a lot of ways, as easily as it is to make Natalie the villain, Caleb's a villain in the way that he allowed this to happen. And he knew what was happening and he just allowed it to continue and get worse and worse and worse. And I agree
Absolutely.
with you that he was hogtied by the patriarchy and he was never able to recover, even to save himself or his family.
Right.
Very good point. Yeah, she says, in response to her children saying, Mom, I winced instinctually, then softened my face and turned. And it's so much about the optics of things. Even right at the end of the book, she says, even from this view, they've lost everything. It's over. And she says, even from this view, it really does look like you could just walk up and kick it over, that it's just all for optics, that it was all just for the likes.
Right, which is so interesting and makes me think about motherhood and the performance of motherhood. And again, it feeds back into these like very structured gender roles where Natalie has been told her whole life that motherhood will come easy to her, that her job as a woman is to usher in the next generation of people. And from day one, it's going really not great. I feel like the author really had a gloves off approach to talking about postpartum. And like you were saying, it's further than depression. It's definitely like in the realms of like psychosis, where you're imagining that your newborn infant is judging you and is evil, and you're fantasizing about just letting her roll off of your lap and things like that. It's very dark and intense and emotional. And I think it's kind of skirted over, but it's skirted over because we're in the mind of a woman who won't have those internal dialogues with herself and continues to insist that she's okay. She won't even be honest internally, which is
Yeah, and it
really
reflects
scary.
a certain culture that we have around motherhood and just postpartum in general, and the judgment of it both internally by women and externally by everyone else. And so she does develop a cynicism that I think comes from being a young woman. Even at the beginning of the story, when she meets Rena in the grocery store, she says, she has this line. Well, right before that, she says, most people don't think about anything. Most people are morons. So you can tell right away she's got this cynicism to her that just bleeds into every interaction. She says about Rena, she flipped me off over her shoulder behind my back as she walked away. I didn't see it, but I felt it. And I feel like I know people like this. I know people that have that general cynicism about life. They expect to see things a certain way, and so they do see them that way.
It's so interesting that you bring up that line though, because like she doesn't see Rena flipping her off. She's
She doesn't see
so
anything.
obsessed with these other women to, in a way, justify her own choices. And I also think that, I don't know if this again was intentional, but I feel like there's so much undiagnosed, like emotional and social disorders happening here. Because again, like going back to like the postpartum and everything like that, she's kind of expressing how she's feeling to her mother when they're in the hospital room and the nurse, her ears are like perking up. And she's like, oh, it seems like maybe a psych eval is in the future. And her
Right.
mom tells her, like, oh, go take a jog around the parking lot. And she does. That whole scene was pretty intense. But I do
Yeah.
think that like Natalie's fascination on other women and her internal monologue definitely, like, I'm getting kind of like a narcissist or somebody that is like completely like psychotic at times.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There's this part at the end. I was trying not to jump ahead, but there's this part at the end where her mom turns to her and says, bad Natalie. And every interaction with her mom, it was just so toxic. And again, I don't mean to point too sharply, but I feel like I know these women. They are so familiar to me in some ways that I feel like a lot of the behaviors that Natalie had internally in her head, I feel like I've witnessed them in other women growing up, and just those toxic little behaviors that you become indoctrinated to.
Right. Yeah. See, for me, this is terrifying. I'm sure that I have met people like this. One of the first things when I was reading this book was I really hope that people don't have an internal dialogue that's like this as they're talking to your face and kind of coming across normal and polite. And maybe you see like a little barb or two, but in their minds, they're calling you like a C word and saying how
Right.
like gained weight
Right.
or whatever. It's so intense to me. I
Right.
Yeah.
It's terrifying. Yeah. That's why I said it's probably one of the scariest books because I just don't want to be in that space. And maybe it's because it is so familiar to me that immediately as I start to feel it, I'm like, no. No, I don't want to be in this space anymore. And I really just can't think of anything scarier than what happened to her. She's been dropped into the middle of nowhere. She has no friends, no one that believes in her. She's racist, she's ignorant. And for the first, 3/4 of the book, I was sure her foot was going to fall off when she
Right.
described when she was dunked under and baptized before she went away to college. She describes that feeling of just everyone being lost and without the Lord's sacrifice and the Lord's forgiveness. And I distinctly remember feeling that as a teenager in the church, there was this overwhelming feeling of being responsible for everyone's debts. And I think that that's sort of the hysteria that can come over the deeply religious at times is just having to take on the weight of the entire world, it feels like.
Right.
I was going to say, I think cold bleached water on your face will do that to you 100% every time when you're just being dunked in the water repeatedly.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I feel like Natalie holds that belief. And again, I feel like the religious aspect of this was not really delved into the reason why people stay, the community that they form. Like, Natalie is not a communal creature in any way, she's got her own things going on. But I do think that Natalie holds that belief of needing to atone for the sins of the people around her, but also in the other hand, it's I'm so much better because I don't sin in the same way. But really
right.
quickly, I wanted to hop back to her mother because I did think that that was a really interesting character. So I feel like we started this episode talking about how we both feel that Natalie is an unreliable narrator. And so we know that Natalie was brought up again in a high control religion. She talks about being around very big families, and her first kind of interaction with like the secular world is when she goes off to college. But I would like to say that Natalie talks about her mother and her experiences with her mother in one way. And obviously, that experience with her mother in the hospital was horrible and not the right advice. But I do think that the facts that we know about her mother kind of paint a different story. So her
Yeah.
mother continues to stay single, which is not something that's done. She does not have more children other than Natalie and her sister. And she also raises Natalie knowing that Natalie is this smart, sharp witted person, so much so that she gets her to Harvard.
Right.
And even when she's talking to Natalie about her future, she always kind of imagined Natalie the doctor, Natalie the professor. And she has this moment where Natalie is introducing her to Caleb, and she tells Natalie, if you marry this man, you will become his smiling shadow,
Right.
which I thought was such a brilliant line, but also kind of showed me a little bit more about her mother's character, because I think that a woman who truly believed all those doctrines would have seen Caleb as a vehicle to happiness and success for her daughter. But she knew that Natalie was something else, something other, something that maybe didn't completely align with these values and morals. Without outrightly saying it, I feel like she did try to kind of push Natalie in a different direction. Even just the fact of like allowing her to go to an Ivy League school away from home and be part of the secular world, I think speaks volumes to how progressive her mother really was. And her mother supports her sister when she gets a divorce. Her sister, again, to me, reads less like somebody who is indoctrinated in this very strict religion and kind of like in a lower economic bracket, and kind of marries the high school sweetheart, has a bunch of kids with him, but he's kind of drunk and an idiot. That doesn't to me read like pious religious. One of the first memories that she has of her mom is her telling her just to be nice. And so I think as the readers we're like, okay, so she's like being brought up to like be hyper aware of her actions and how they like interact with other people. But by the end of the book, her mother is kind of screaming at her, why is it so hard for you to be nice? And I feel like it's a personal failing on Natalie that she can't be empathetic. She can't reach out her hand to somebody in need, even if that someone in need is her sister. If she is Christian, again, I feel like it's not really specified if she's, Mormon or whatever. But if she is Christian, she's not really internalizing the key tenets of what it is to be Christ-like. And so even in like the later chapters when her sister is dating that pastor that is like accepting of gay people and just wants people to be kind to each other. I think that Natalie can only see people in the roles that she has assigned to them, but there's actually more to them. I
Yeah,
don't think that,
including herself, right? I mean,
right,
she can only see
absolutely.
herself in that role. Yeah. And so it's
Yeah,
so hard to even make opinions about any of the people in her life because you're right, their actions don't necessarily match Natalie's internal dialogue that is supposed to go with those actions. Yeah, I
right.
completely see that. Yeah. I
Yeah,
wonder if that's also Natalie, like we were talking about yesterday, just being kind to yourself, being nice to yourself. I wonder how nice Natalie is to herself and how much there isn't that it also isn't bleeding into her opinions and like the way that she portrays her sister, for instance. And how
absolutely.
she kind of shows her sister as being so distant. But really, what other action do people have in your life when you're so mentally ill and very rich and very capable and seemingly have it all and are getting the interviews and the followers? What really control does anyone have in your life?
Right. Yeah. And I think that at some point, her sister has been trying to reach out her hand at so many different times, and Natalie just kind of bites every time. And at some point, you just have to kind of choose your own happiness, whether that's like what your family says is okay, society says is okay, your religion says
Right.
is okay. If you need to leave your abusive husband, cut ties with your family, and move forward in a way that's positive and productive for you, we only have this time here. So, you know,
Right. Yeah. We were talking about the just indoctrination and the religion. I just wanted to finish up on that really quick if you had
yeah,
anything more to say. The constant monitoring of your thoughts is often encouraged within organized religion. And so this is very natural to the prose when I was reading it. The sorry God, I saw a post in the last couple of weeks that said something like, when I was little, I thought telepaths would hear all my strange thoughts in my head. So I would yell really loudly whenever I had one. And there was a comment right below it that said, so when you're not Catholic, you think it's telepaths. And
right,
then there was a comment below that that said, this explains like 70% of America. And I just thought it was really interesting having grown up Catholic. I didn't think it was telepaths. I was pretty sure it was God. We were told that God could hear everything. And
right.
so that the random Bible verses within her head and the constantly apologizing just really showed for me that her indoctrination was so complete. She really believed it, hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah, absolutely. The God as the first audience member, I thought was brilliant as well, because I
Yeah.
also, I grew up Christian and evangelical though, so I feel like it's a little bit more accepting and open and less
Sure.
rigid, less controlled. But there was definitely this sense of like God is watching you, and it's not in like a you've got a buddy who always has your back kind of way. It's like a Santa
Right.
Claus like knows when you're sleeping, when you're awake, and is going to like tally up everything at the end of your existence, and you might be damned for eternity like
Right.
based on
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Right. Terrifying.
very
Yeah, she has
interesting.
this line at the end where she says something like, I need to show how beautiful I can be so that you need to be without all of this stuff and live so purely to show God and everyone how beautiful you can be. And it was honestly just so heartbreaking. That was what she considered the point to her life was to
Right,
show everyone how beautiful she could be.
right, yeah,
The way that she would introduce the nannies and just the relationship that she had with the nannies, I thought was so interesting. There was this part where when she first introduced just Louise and the not nanny, she said, I realized in that moment that I would never have to be alone with my children again. Oh, it was just
right.
terrifying, the book.
Or
Yeah.
even there was like a quote where she doesn't want to have her mom come over, but she's like, but my mom could hold the baby. And so immediately her mom is there, you know?
Right. Yeah, and she says she talks about there not being any trending audio to soften the moments with her daughter. And that was just wild for me. It isn't a thought that I haven't had about just like there being audio in my life, but just to think of it in that moment and how it would soften the moment. It was clear that we were in the mind of someone who was not doing well.
Right. And, I feel like one thing about this book is it's sparking so many conversations, even if it didn't
Right.
directly go there. But it is an interesting conversation where we are watching so many trad wife influencers blow up, and we don't know what's happening behind the scenes. We have the Ruby Frankies of it all, where there's horrific things happening, people going to prison. And we also have, I mean, I don't know who's got a nanny or what, but the whole thought of being a tradwife influencer while you have nannies to take care of your children, while you have cleaning staff to take care of your house, while you may or may not have like prep teams to help prep the food that you prepare, and you may or may not be the primary breadwinner for your family. What is traditional about that?
Right.
You're selling, it's all built on nothing really.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And you were saying about with Caleb, I think there's this part towards the end when Caleb says that they want to kill her and she just like loses it, saying, I did everything right. I married the man. I had the children. I created the universe that we live in. I've become the perfect Christian woman. I no longer ask questions that my husband does not want to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I have to jump forward in my notes. Speaking of her talking about becoming the best Christian woman, there's a quote. She's her whole life been told that she needs to be a mother and a homemaker. She hasn't actually been told that her whole life. Her mother has very much said, go to school, get your education, do what you want to do. Natalie had a bad experience in college where she felt like she was othered, she was ostracized. She watched women participating in capitalism and decided that that wasn't the route for her. She had one person, Caleb, who looked at her and was like, you're pretty cool. And nobody had ever looked at her like that. And I think that there's a line talking about how she had never been likable. And for the first time in her life, someone who was likable liked her. And if there isn't another option, is it really a choice? So she's gone out into the world. She's decided that I don't fit in here. I don't like the way that these people are living their lives. She has one person, one man, they're like 19 years old, show interest in her. And that's the person that she decides to marry.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Dr. Gabor Mate has talked a lot about this, that trauma is not what happens to you, it's what happens inside of you. And that's what we suspect is happening with Natalie, right? Is that she wasn't told all her life that she needed to have children and live these traditional values. She was told maybe something about that, about having children. She talks about learning about menopause for the first time and how terrifying that would be to her, that she wouldn't be able to have children as a young girl. And it seems that for whatever reason, a lot of what was told to Natalie, she was traumatized by it and she internalized it in a way that was unhealthy and then acted out those internalizations later on in life. And I think that's what you were speaking to, that maybe Natalie's mom isn't the way that she is portrayed in the book, that she's actually kind of normal and that Natalie has taken it so harshly for whatever reason.
Right. Yeah. And I think like to the point of what you're saying about her talking about like doing all the right things and all of this, is that there's another line talking about how if she just continues to wake up and smile and take care of the babies and do the cooking and do the cleaning and be polite to people and again smile and be nice and thank God, at one point she'll be able to pull this other version of herself into herself, which is actually something that I kind of sympathized and related to. Because of course, being present on social media, you put your best foot forward. We're not always creating, we're not always reading, we're not always making something. We don't always look our best, but we kind of strive to be that person. And so even though Natalie is so unlikable and there's no part of me that wants to be anything like her, I thought it was a testament to Burke that there were points that you could empathize with Natalie.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like we've said, she's racist, she's ignorant, she's terrible to the people in her life, but there was commentary on culture and on her role within that she plays within culture that was very relatable. Something that I could definitely hear someone that I know say. Yeah, it reminded me of that famous line from Crime and Punishment, that your worst sin is that you've destroyed and betrayed yourself for nothing. And I think that that's something that creators should really take to heart, that you can create this like beautiful facade and everyone will flock to it and love it. But if it's not for you and it's not something that you've loved, you've really betrayed yourself. You've given away so much of what makes you important to people who are just never going to understand it or care for it. And to just make sure that you stay true to yourself and that you don't make a life for other people.
Yeah. And conversely, to know as consumers of media that not everything is as it seems. There are things that are going on behind the scenes that we don't know about. And just because somebody presents themselves to be an authority in a space or some sort of expert, it doesn't mean that we know that they have any sort of actual background or passion, aptitude for whatever it is that they're talking about. Everything needs to be taken with like a heaping tablespoon of salt at this point.
Right. Yeah. And that's
Um,
how you develop that the character that allows you to make those good decisions is to both witness them and to go through them and to watch other people go through them. And it's not going to be easy, but eventually you'll make a little bit of a sandcastle of your
yeah.
life, and you'll be able to like have a little area for yourself.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the children. So we kind of talked about there's a point where Natalie's trying to escape from the farm. The story is told in a couple different timelines. So we've got like the present, which is the past, like the 1800s. And then there's the past, which is like the
Which
time
is
that we're
like,
living in now when she's like on social media and everything like that. There are so many times where I was like, justice for Mary, or that scene where Maeve is crying after the trap. And then the way that she like tentatively seeks closeness from Natalie actually made me want to sob. So like,
right.
I like the thought of a child who needs their mother and can't have them. Natalie, after her psychosis, that entire thing was so hard.
Yeah. Right. And I honestly, that's why I bumped up the ending because, or the rating on this because of the ending, because I just think that those hard moments are so hard to write about. They're hard to hear about. They're hard to even know exist. And it's important that we know that they exist and that things like that can happen and emergencies happen all the time when you least
Yeah.
expect them. And you
I'm
need to be prepared and not let yourself get taken away with so much ego so that you can't be there for the people that need you.
absolutely. I'm so curious if Burke is like a mother herself, you know?
Right. Yeah. 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 I was going to say the part when Clementine finally says, "Did you honestly never suspect?" And Natalie thinks that she knows what Clementine is thinking about her, that she's thinking how blind and stupid her mother is, how crazy. Quote, "My daughter is so modern, so she's probably trying to figure out the proper diagnosis for me. That's what liberal women do in the face of what they can't understand." Okay.
Right.
Oh, all right.
But also, Natalie, if you had a diagnosis and the proper medications, maybe none of this would have happened. Holy
I
God.
was like, okay.
Yeah.
That wasn't directly at Sarah at any way. No way. There's no way she can't
Right.
see me through this book right now.
Right.
But on the children, I felt when Clementine came back and asked her mother, "Why didn't you want to live in this world? Why did you never want to be a part of it?" The way Natalie would say, "They're always watching," that the children are always watching, and the pride that Shannon felt for Clementine for moving on and telling Clementine to be easy on Natalie when she came back, that it wouldn't be easy for Natalie to see how far Clementine had gone. Even Mary's book and her recollection of her time on the farm, that she was never lonely because she had her mother and her father and her cows and chickens, and the only stories that she ever heard were the ones that they told her. The only food that she ever ate was the food that they caught or grew. It kind of reminded me of Nemo's dad because he kind of ran into the same thing too, right? Like, "I'll never let anything happen to you." And I also definitely struggle with this because I don't want to miss like any part of their life. And I don't want them to be ill prepared for something in their life that, I could somehow reason was my fault that I wasn't able to prepare them. If you don't mind, it reminds me of that poem by Khalil Gibran on children. I don't know if you've ever heard it, but it goes, "Your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. They came through you, but not from you. And though they are with you, yet they belong not to you. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts, for they have their own thoughts. You may house their bodies, but not their souls, for their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. You may strive to be like them, but seek not to make them like you, for life goes not backward, nor tarries with yesterday. You are the bows from which your children, as living arrows, are sent forth." And I think that that's very important for parents to understand, and also maybe the hardest thing that parents ever have to understand. you.
I love that. It's so beautiful. Yeah.
I know, it's so beautiful. I actually am so proud I got through that without crying. So.
Right. I know. I was like, okay, oh, she's gonna make me cry. No, it's totally beautiful. But I think that Natalie kind of embodies like in 2026, the way that we're expected to parent is vastly different from the way that like I know I was parented. And I do think I kind of fall somewhere in between. I'm definitely not like a mommy vlogger, like for so many reasons. I think that that's very dangerous. I don't like to put my child on the internet. I just don't want that to be connected. But I do find that I find myself somewhere in between. I'm not a mommy vlogger. I'm not a perfect mother. I think I'm a bit more involved than my parents were. He's not very free range, but it is a little bit of a middle ground, I would say. Like I'm a little bit more hands off because I did, for me personally, grow up with parents that I felt were a little bit overbearing and I always wanted more freedom. So I think that a lot of times we parent the way that we wish we were parented. And I'm just kind of hoping that I'm showing up in the way that my child needs me to show up. And I think that I am. We have some
I
conversations
know you
about
are.
it.
Yeah. I
You
know
know,
you are. I
so,
think I am.
yeah,
We're hopefully doing this good. We're listening. We're listening.
yeah.
That's
We're
important,
learning.
because
We're
people are saying
apologizing.
things. Yeah. You've got to listen. You've got to
Yeah,
apologize. You've got to, make sure that you're not missing anything big.
right.
Yeah, because I'm going to say that I think as I get older, I've learned that the scariest thing for me is one of the sentences in the book is, quote, "I can't help shake the feeling that there is something that I miss." And I feel like that applies to so many different things for me. It's like one of my biggest fears that I've missed something that will be come back and get me later, or
Right.
someone will fall ill, due to something that I didn't know. And so I guess I have a question. Where would you put this book? In what category would you put this book? Where would you put it, in the library or in the bookstore? Because it changes how you feel about it, I think.
Right. To me, I would say that this is like social commentary.
Right. Yeah.
There are some thriller aspects to it. And I do think that there were actually some people that were kind of upset because it's sort of marketed as magical realism or like a
Hmm.
true time travel story. And it's like spoilers on spoilers. You already gave you a spoiler warning, but it's
The
not that.
biggest
It's
one.
not
Yeah.
like it's not a time travel story at all. So I wouldn't put it there. To me, I would think I would say satire, social commentary.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah.
Maybe leaning towards horror, but not really.
Yeah. I'd almost put it in like suspense,
Right.
thriller, somewhere along there. Because let me
Psychological
be honest,
thriller.
I'll tell you what I actually thought was going to happen in the book. And I wasn't sure I was going to mention it. So what I thought was that Caleb's dad won the election. And I thought that everything that they had talked about actually played out, and that they had reverted the country back 100 years.
Oh man.
I thought everyone was successful, is what I thought had happened. And that
Yeah.
it actually played out, and that over that like 10 years that we had like regressed the entire country, and that she was going to have this like coming to the table moment where she realized that she was like the mastermind behind this unraveling of our country.
That's so interesting. Yeah, like political
Because
aspect of
it
this book
kept
is
like
fascinating.
boiling in the background. It was one of the first things that she said, and so I was like, oh, there it goes. There's the arc that's going to come back and get us
Right.
in the
Right.
end. And so
And
that's what
also
I.
interesting because so we didn't really like discuss this, but like what happens is that Caleb essentially won't get a job. She's got her first kid. He's doing yoga in the lawn as the dads are coming home or going to work in the morning. She's mortified by this, even though they don't need to go out and
Yes.
work. She needs him to have some sort of aspiration and to at least put on a face that he's trying. So she brings up again, like wanting a farm and is kind of like, oh yeah, you can be a cowboy. And that isn't that something that you always wanted. Essentially what happens is that Caleb is going into these farming groups trying to figure out like how to be a farmer. But the people who are serious and actually take things like seriously and know that there are stakes involved start getting really annoyed with him by the time that they've like killed their third dairy cow. And so he starts going into these more niche subcultures of like farming,
Right.
rural America sort of stuff. He actually is talking to somebody on there about his wife and his wife's profile, Yesteryear, that she started. And this guy ends up being some sort of kind of like Joe Rogan-esque manosphere person. So that is where the bulk of her following comes from, is the manosphere, is this tradwife area. He
Yes.
even refers to her as like the perfect Aryan wife. And so that is the following that she's getting.
The little subversive racism is just
Right.
throughout the entire book.
Yeah. It's very lucrative, the dog
Right.
whistles of it all. Yeah.
Mm. And I did have one vocab word because you know me.
Yeah.
It's beatifically in the book, quote, that was, however, how all good marriages worked. Husbands moved instinctually through life, doing what they wanted to do and not doing what they don't want to do, while I, happy wife, happy life, follow beatifically around him. And beatifically for me is personal, one of the very first very long words that I can remember memorizing as a kid. It's a step in the canonization into sainthood in Catholicism, but it means to act in a way that shows great happiness, deep peace, or saintly calm. In the Catholic Church, when someone dies, beatification is the process of confirming that the deceased person is in heaven, and it grants them the title blessed so that they can be prayed for. It's really a word that you'd have to be around the church quite a bit in order to use it in a sentence like that. And so again, yeah, I think that the author has definitely been exposed to some indoctrination.
Yeah, definitely. So I know this episode's getting long, so really quick, let's rapid fire a couple things. One, I really liked the way that this book talked about the realities of marrying what I called freakishly fast, the kind of awkwardness of their first physical encounter with each other. Caleb is interested in very vanilla things that for Natalie, she finds disgusting, and she's like, can we just do it the normal way? So he can never really fully enjoy himself.
Yeah.
The whole thing is just so
Tell us
cringy.
more about that. Tell us more about that. Yeah.
I thought that this book was very compulsive. This is the perfect book to pick up at the airport when you're going on vacation for a
Yes.
week and finish it in that week because you want to know what happens.
Right. If you need the next 48 hours to go by, pick up this book. It's fun.
Right.
Yeah.
There's so many things that I want to touch on. I think that the marketing of all of this is very bizarre. I do wonder if it would be such a, I know that it's topical. I understand why it's so viral. It's amazing to see a debut author, author. It's amazing to see a debut author kind of break through the glass ceiling in this really cool way. But it is also in the back of my mind, I'm like, okay, so this is a podcaster who was already successful. Anne Hathaway picked it up before it was even published. There are some things with the pacing at the end that I feel could have been flushed out a little bit better. Could that have been fixed if it wasn't being rushed to production to rush to make it a movie so people could make as much money as possible on it, which everybody should get their checks for this book for sure. But, I again, just the marketing machine of it all kind of always as a little anti-capitalist makes me take a little step back for a second. Again, I'm really happy that I read it.
Right.
But this book also makes me think of We Used to Live Here. And it kind of makes me wonder, so about people in general, I've got a question for our audience. If you were to wake up in a life that wasn't yours, but mirrored your own in some ways, how long would you put up a fight? Or would you just kind of play along and quietly try to escape?
Yeah, I mean that's the problem, right? Because with the microphone that she finds out in the field,
Right.
because at what point, I mean, you might lose your foot.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just at that point when she was like, "This has got to be a set," I was like, "Girl, this is not a set."
I was like, is it a set? This might be a
it took
set.
so much more. It took so much more, but I was just her describing that foot. I was like, I don't think this is a set.
Oh, but that
Yeah.
actually brings up one more thing for me that I want to mention
Yeah.
really quickly.
Please do.
So, okay. So, throughout the entire book, Natalie's inner monologue, she'll be having a full on conversation with somebody being like, oh, how are you? It's so good to see you. And in her head, she's like, oh, this stupid C word. She's so
Constantly.
fat and ugly and I hate her or whatever. But so her inner monologue is all, or dialogue is always in italics. And then towards the end of the book, when she's kind of slipping and losing her grasp on reality, she has these italicized moments, but they're being heard out loud. So she's having a conversation, for example, with her father-in-law, Doug, and he's talking about how they need to hire a PR firm. And she's like, why would you think I need a PR firm? You're a fucking idiot. If it wasn't for me, your son would be dead in a ditch. And then there's silence and she realizes that she says it out loud and she's like, oh my God, Doug, I'm so sorry, blah, 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 blah. But I kind of want to do a reread from this book because I do think that there was a moment in time where she was getting into an argument with Rena and Rena mentions, we can hear all the things you mumble and say under your breath.
Right.
And so the narrative we get from Natalie is I'm the perfect Christian woman. I'm so put together. But is she in the corner just being oh, fucking idiot, and rolling her eyes during this entire time?
I
Is
mean,
she?
you have to wonder, right? Because at the end, and I just listened to the last like half an hour right before we started again, because I just wanted to make sure it was really fresh. Right at the end, when Rena walks in for the interview, Natalie is convinced that this isn't her house for the 100th time and is like, this isn't my place, this isn't my place. And during that time, she mentions that Rena never takes her eyes off of her. And whereas the production host over on the corner is like trying to get her attention, and Rena's like, I see. And she sits down. And the way that everyone, even Clementine, treats her is that of someone who has a long-term mental illness that isn't able
Right.
to distinguish reality. And so the way that everybody sits down and they go, oh, okay, is that how it is? And instead of like, at some point when your delusions become so large that the people around you can no longer talk you out of them, they try to just navigate
Placate
them.
in a way. Yeah.
Right. And so they don't want to upset you. They know that'll lead to even more argument. It could lead to something physical. And so they end up just trying to steer the delusions rather than try to deny them outright. And so I think that there was a lot of just the steering of the delusions because a lot of times she asks questions and nobody answers. And it's, I think, because that's the 100th time she's asked that, or she already knows the answer, or she's already been in a
Right.
fight about it. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
I thought it was a good capture of what mental illness might look like
Yes. If
from the inside.
undiagnosed, untreated,
Right.
allowed
And
to just
enabled
like
by
run
everyone.
raw.
Right. Because
Absolutely.
even the grandma, I know that she is probably not portrayed correctly, but she lets the children come and stay with her, but she lets the other children stay with Natalie after that. And so
Right.
there's even a bit of placating there. And I think everyone just really wanted Natalie to be healthy.
Yeah. So last note. I
Yeah.
did find it also fascinating that the only person that Natalie agreed to do an interview with, like her first and last interview that we're getting snippets of throughout the book, and you're kind of like when you're starting to read it thinking like, oh, she's like really famous and she's doing interviews all the time. This is just regular. But the only interview that she does is after she's actually in prison. And the only reason that she will do it is because Rena, her old college roommate, is the one that's conducting the interview. And Natalie is the one who specifically asks for her. And I feel like, again, like Natalie's inner dialogue is like, she's done all right, but she's like nowhere near a household name. This interview is really going to do well for her. The only reason she picks
Yeah.
Rena is so she can still, at her lowest point, feel better than someone else.
Right. Yeah, that's what she says. I'm doing this interview to, oh, the word is so interesting. It's like to generate sympathy for the court case, essentially. At some point, Rena says to her, well, I just want to make sure that you aren't being coerced. And she says that she leans in real diplomatically and she says, and who best to do this interview but someone who's known me my whole life? And that's you, Rena. That's you. We need each other. And like, it's a real, like, girl, you need something else.
Yeah, like prison or
And
like psych
and
ward. I'm not
also
sure.
how brilliant it is and how brilliant it was of Rena. I thought this was so brilliant because Natalie's trying to get a bunch of information. Oh, so did you have that family? Did you have that family? Did you
Mhm.
get that thing that I want so bad that I knew you would never get because I paid for it and you didn't?
Right.
And like, that's essentially what she's asking. And Rena's like, yeah, I'll tell you right after the interview, right afterward, because afterward, there's not going to be any chance. She's going to probably be hysterical. She'll be on another,
Yeah.
tangent, maybe missing again in action. And so she'd never have to answer those questions. And I thought it was a good tactic when you're with people who are trying to manipulate you to just keep putting it off a little bit and it'll go
Yeah.
away.
Overall,
Yeah, I
this
thought
was
that was
such
really
a
smart.
fascinating read
Right. Yeah, I'm
and so
so glad I read
topical.
it. I could
Me
tell
too.
when you finished it that it was you were like, oh, this one, and I was like, okay, I'll read it.
Yeah, I had another friend but she was asking for like romance recommendations. And she told me like no fairies, no weird Hogwarts stuff. And I was like, Allie Hazelwood. but I was talking to her
Yeah.
about Yesteryear. And I was like, it's not a good time, but it's a great book.
Yeah, I don't know if I can like recommend it, but
Right.
as like, but it should be required reading for certain groups of
Yeah.
people,
It
especially
also
if
might
you've,
be.
yeah, if it's like, if you're mommy vlogging or you have like 5+ children on the internet, then yeah, probably.
I could totally see especially where social media is becoming like actual careers and things like that and
Right.
things that you can study. I could see this being required reading.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think that covers everything that's been bouncing around in our heads about yesteryear. For now, anyway. We really hope we can keep the discussion going in the comment section because we're so curious what you thought about it. You right there listening to us. Yes, you.
Right. I would love to know what our listeners thought of Natalie as a character and the marketing of this book, and so much more.
Thanks for spending part of your day with us, especially if you made it all the way to the end of this episode.
And if you did make it all the way to the end, leave us some sort of space-related emoji or comment just to confuse anybody who didn't make it.
If you'd like to talk about more books with us, don't forget to subscribe and find us on all social media platforms at Basically Bookish Pod.
And until next time, happy reading!